Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an after reaction to the Jags winning for the first time in a couple weeks, and only the second time this season. And for the first time this season, realistically, looking like a complete football team with the demolition of the New England Patriots, 32-16, and at times it didn't even seem that close. Good win for the Jags, a much needed win for the Jags. And what I'll say before I get to the realism of this is this. I did a live react. If you didn't see that, you should go check it out. This is the team that I expected this season. What it looked like today against New England. At least something close to this. Defense had its moments, and the first quarter was atrocious defensively. They looked bad in the first quarter. And then the game just turned in the second quarter. I don't know what happened. I'm not entirely sure why, but the offense really looked good, and then the defense kind of finally stepped up, forcing 3 straight 3-and-outs. We got the big punt return touchdown from Parker Washington. 96 yards, I think it was. Like, that's absolutely insane. That kind of really just made the game go get out of control for the New England Patriots, and Jags win, and it got a little interesting in the fourth quarter, but not really anything crazy. After the Patriots missed the 2-point conversion, pretty much ended the game, and then the clock management on their final drive was very bizarre. But the Jags win, get their second win of the season in their second game in London, and it was much needed. Trevor looked really good, and what's weird is the rushing offense looked really good. But no ETN, not a problem. Tank Bigsby proving again why I think he should be the starter. He 26 carries for 118 yards, 4.5 a carry, 2 touchdowns, but he looked good all day. The Jags got a little too run happy on their on their monstrous 17-play, 84-yard, 11-minute and 24-second drive that ended on 4th and 1. They ran the ball, I think it was 12 straight times on the drive at the end, pretty much, and it was or 11 straight times, I think, and they probably should have threw a play action at the end there somewhere. I don't mind that they went for it, but you have to make sure you get it, because then you put life into New England, and that's exactly what happened. New England, in less than 3 minutes, went 94 yards for a touchdown. Our defense isn't good enough to make those types of mistakes. If you think they should have kicked the field goal, fine. I don't know if I agree with you per se, but you have a right to that opinion, and I don't have a lot to argue against that, because that would have made it an 18-point game, 3 possessions in the fourth quarter. That's a very valid argument to be had there, even if it was late, and even though it's still 11 minutes left. But I won't argue against the field goal there. I think that's a very reasonable thought process. But I don't mind necessarily that they went for it, especially the way they were running the ball. And then the Jags did have a nice solid 8-play drive after that. It didn't end up in points. It only went 26 yards, but the most important thing is it took off 4 minutes and 24 seconds off the clock. And by the time they punted, it was under 4 minutes left. I really was annoyed by the third down play. That was a really stupid decision by Trevor not to just take a sack. A sack would have been better there. But the next drive didn't matter, because Trayvon Walker had himself a drive with the massive third down sack, and then the pressure on 4th and 26 to cause basically the incompletion. It didn't really matter, but he got in there quick, and it was stupendous. And then the Jags end it with a late touchdown by Tank Bigsby, scoring his second touchdown of the day. What a game. Jaguars ran the ball 39 times in this game. This is old school Jaguar. Fred Taylor, Maurice Jones-Drew football right here. If you like rushing, you love that. And they had a nice, good, solid 4.4 yards per carry. What are you doing? Sorry, my cat was doing something weird. One of the biggest differences in this game is the Jags were 3 for 5. Had 3 touchdowns and 5 attempts in the red zone. 2 for 4 really, because the last one was that weird drive. But either way, the fact that they scored touchdowns in the red zone is important. They did obviously have the turnover on downs, and they did settle for a field goal inside the 5. Not great, but progress. And I think I want to talk about the progress, and it's gotten lost in the 1 and 5 start, and obviously the absolute annihilation in Buffalo was the absolute low point of the season for the Jaguars, and getting just their doors blown off by I don't remember the score, and I don't want to remember the score, but since then, offensively, I think it would be unfair to say that there hasn't been progress. I think there's been a lot of progress. I think the offense is starting to resemble what a lot of people thought we would see this season. And it's still not perfect. But since that Jacksonville disaster in Buffalo, they put up 20 against the Texans. I thought they looked fine against the Texans, but they couldn't make enough plays to beat the Texans, and that was a problem. But that was a major problem. Then they put up the 34th spot, and the Colts getting their first win. Last week against the Bears, I think that game's different. If we didn't drop a couple of touchdown passes early in the game, in parts of that game, we dropped 4 touchdown passes in that game. That game's different with just a couple of them. I don't think that's a blowout. I think the Jags gave up in that game. I really do. But I still think Trevor, for all his warts, played well in that game, with 1 interception notwithstanding. And then today, they didn't necessarily need him because they ran the ball a mile. But he ended up 15 for 20 for 193 in the touchdown. I thought he pinpointed the pass as well. And when they called on his number, I thought he played well. Does that mean he's $55 million worth of great quarterback? No, not yet. But this offense has shown signs of progression and progress as the season wore on. I think that needs to be seen because it can be lost in the disaster that the season has been, especially the disaster that's on the defensive side of the ball. If the defense plays like it did today for the rest of the season, I think outside of the first quarter, I think the Jags have a good chance to make a run or to win a few more games. Maybe even get to close to 500 potentially. Probably not, but maybe there's a more of a hope. But now the caveat comes, right? And this is where, if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, come on, Zunker, come on, Christopher, you know exactly what this caveat is. They played the Patriots, and they had the luxury of being in London for 2 weeks, so they didn't have to come over. And New England's arguably the worst team in the league, and I would say they are in a battle with Carolina and for that title, and depending on how you feel about Cleveland as well, and obviously the Jags were in that conversation as well up until today. So there is a caveat, and I want to acknowledge that caveat because, as happy as I am, as thrilled as I am that this team came out and played a great game, I would all around, I still saw things that I didn't like. I saw the first quarter was awful on defense. Defensively, they were just they were just Swiss cheese again, and they did lock it down, I do agree, but that's what I expected against a rookie quarterback making the second start with a team that has absolutely no skill position players. Just none. None that are NFL caliber. Realistically, there's really nobody on the Patriots that should scare you. Hunter Henry is a solid tight end. That's probably the only one that I would be like, yeah, I will. I think he's a solid starting tight end in this league. But, Polk, that rookie from Washington, man, he's dropped the ball a ton this year, and you almost feel for the guy because I think it's in his head now. He dropped an easy ball early in the game. I think he dropped another one later. But nonetheless, the Jags got the victory, and, caveats aside, at least you're seeing some of the progress they talk about in practice and how they thought they were so close. And in a lot of games, in 3 of the losses, they were, a bounce here, a better drive here. They could be 3-4 or 4-3, and the conversation is completely different, right? Because if you're 3-4 or 4-3, then everyone's looking at your schedule like, yeah, that's fair. I mean, the schedule's not easy. I mean, the Browns loss looks bad at this point, but I mean, Miami, they still lost Miami with Tua. That is a game they should have won, but that was still with Tua before they lost Tua. You know, Buffalo was still on their heater in the beginning of the season, although that has definitely completely fallen off the map here in the last couple of weeks for Buffalo. They have not looked great. I know they won last week, but they have not looked good. But that game was their peak. Then, you know, losing to the Bears, who have been playing well lately. Losing at Houston's not it's an understandable loss, but the reality is when you lose so much and then you have the two embarrassing losses, the Bears loss and the Bills loss, suddenly, you know, the narrative shifts. And you're 2-5. You don't look good at time. Most of the season, you haven't looked good. Your defense has looked bad for all of about, except for maybe 3 quarters of the season. And I'm talking 3 individual quarters. You know, the first quarter against the Dolphins, and then probably these 2 quarters here against the Patriots. But you know, even still, this. So you know, and the schedule gets just, you know, we had a reprieve, if you will, but the schedule gets brutal again. And you know, and I don't know, you know, where's realistically a game where you could sit here and say they have a reasonable chance. They got the Packers at Philly, Vikings at Lions, Texans. Their next 5. The Jags could be 7-point underdogs or more in all 3 of those games, and then all 5 of those games, and then wouldn't shock me. The Eagles may be the one that you could sit there and be like, oh, the Eagles are a weird disaster, so maybe not them. But still, the Eagles should be favored by a couple of points, by a number of points, But right now, we're not going to focus on that. The Jags do have a victory. And, you know, maybe they can build on that. That's the hope. Let's build on it. And maybe we can steal a game against the Packers next week. That would be the dream, wouldn't it? Stealing a game against the Packers. But we won a game we should have won. And, you know, let's do our best. That's all we can do. But, sorry, I have the Browns special teams today in their game against the Bengals has been an utter disaster. Holy shit. It's so bad right now. It is fire the special teams coordinator tomorrow bad. Especially if you lose this game. But nonetheless, I'm not talking about Browns, I'm talking about Jags. But I'm going to leave it at that. You know, if you want to see more of my full reactions, please watch the live stream. It's going to be up on the channel. You can watch the whole thing if you want. I watched the entire game, the entire game this week as a reaction. I'm going to do live reactions when I can. Won't be able to do them every week. It just depends on the week. But this week, Jags won, and that's what matters. So, I will see you next week for either probably not a live reaction next week, but a post-game reaction at some point. So, until then, everybody, go Jags, deuces.